Good afternoon. I'm Kyle Knackers, and welcome to this news briefing from the 252nd National Meeting and Exposition of the American Chemical Society in Philadelphia. We're joined today by Dr. Luyi Sun and Songshan Zeng from the University of Connecticut. They'll be talking to us about their work on anti-glare and encryption materials inspired by squid and jellyfish skin. Dr. Sun?
Okay, thanks a lot, Carl, and many thanks for this nice opportunity. We will be very glad to show off some of our recent work, how we are inspired by the marine creatures. So basically, in the past year and a half, we have been working on this project, which is mainly inspired by a number of marine animals like squid, like jellyfish, and also, believe it or not, by our wrinkled skin. So, as many of you probably know that jellyfish is typically transparent, and during the evolution, some of the jellyfish has the special feature that once you touch it, it can shrink their skin and it will form wrinkles or cracks and then turn to be opaque. For squid, some kind of squid can have this kind of similar features. A special kind of squid, particularly, they can contract their muscle to show patterned surface and to protect and hide themselves. Also, many of us have the experience during the swim, our finger or skin will form wrinkles. And all this we found tend to be very interesting because it can be a very unique dynamic system to inspire us to develop a series of very unique stimuli responsive materials. So I will let my co-worker Songshan, who has been leading this project, to talk some detail about these three series of very unique materials.
So we actually prepare three type of moisture response wrinkle system, which inspire from the wrinkle fingers. So the first one is the reversible system. So when you apply the moisture, you can see the wrinkle. When you dry it, it will release back to flat surface, which have the same dynamic like the wrinkle fingers, and allow us to make anti-counterfeit tapes. When you breathe on it, you can see the logo. When you dry it, it will disappear. And then the second one is the moisture response wrinkle with the erase after read features. So which means that when you apply the moisture, you can see the wrinkle. If you keep applying the moisture, the wrinkle will disappear. And then even though you dried it and really exposed to the moisture, it can never go back. It allows us to make a very interesting encryption devices. You can read the information and then you can erase simply by moisture and can never go back. So, and the third one is the permanent moisture response wrinkle. So it means that when you apply the moisture, you can see the wrinkles, and then it will stay in the dry state, and no matter you dry it or wet it anymore, it would just stay in here and forever. So, and we can make a kind of water indicators. So when you apply the moisture, you can see the permanent wrinkle can form, and you can see the H2O in there. We can also make it as anti-glare film and the light diffusers. In our second talk, we inspire from the marine life, and then we can prepare a series of materials which are able to change their transparency, colorations, and pattern upon simply stretch and release the sample. So I actually bring a real samples of the transparency change devices. So you can see here is that it's perfectly transparent and in the release state, but when I stretch it, it will become kind of opaque, and then you can barely see the things on another side. And also I can stretch and release the field for multiple circles, actually numerous circles, without losing these properties. So which means it's very durable and reversible. So that's all for my introduction part.
Are there any questions for them? When you get the microphone, please state your name and your affiliation.
So it's Kath O'Driscoll from Chemistry and Industry magazine. I guess first, could you tell us a little bit about how much these films will cost in terms of economics? And also, you mentioned lots of different applications. What do you think the biggest market will be for these types of films?
Okay, well, first of all, talking about the cost, actually all these materials are made of very low-cost raw materials like PDMS elastomer, regular polyvinyl alcohol coatings. So the cost of these materials are very low. believe it or not, they are all commodity materials, and we actually obtain all these samples from industry free of charge. And also the materials themselves are very, very inexpensive. Processing-wise, it is very simple. Actually, I will about to mention that in this project we have quite a few undergraduate students and even one very outstanding high school students involved, and they can all manage the processing, fabrication of the materials, which you can clearly show that it's a very easy, facile process to achieve. Going to the second question regarding applications, that's a very good question. We have quite some applications in mind, to be honest, but I think we probably will need help from industry, and we are very open to work with industry to develop and identify applications. I give some examples. We have 3 systems. One of the system is reversible. So for many applications, we would like to have reversible system so that the nice properties can go back and forth. Basically means we can form wrinkles and then wrinkles will be gone. For example, for the ones show the changes of transparency, I believe for many applications, it's very desirable, which means we can apply moisture, change the transparency, and when the moisture evaporates, the transparency will recover. But for some application or some unique applications, we would like to make it non-reversible. For example, for the second system, we call it read and then permanent erase, which means we can pre-embed some patterns in the materials, and then we can activate to show the patterns, for example, the words. And then people can read it as the information in the system. And after we read it, we can permanently, completely erase it immediately by breathing in front of it. And that basically, we are teasing with each other like maybe this is a material can be used for James Bond, 007. When they read the messages, well, only he knows how to read a message. But immediately after he read a message, then instead of to explode or burn or whatever, he can just breathe and then completely erase it. So we have some ideas, but I truly believe the potential is very wide and very huge, and we are very open to work with the potential industry customers to work together to further develop these materials.
Has anybody from industry yet approached you?
Not much. We did receive some inquiries because, partially because this is the very first time we report this series of materials. We did talk internally and gained some interest. For another project which deals with transparency, color, and pattern change, we did receive quite a few inquiries from industry to develop these materials, particularly the color change materials, as Songshan showed you in the video, to develop all kinds of applications.
Thank you.
Doug Dollimore, American Chemical Society. I have a related question based on what is in the press release about the phone falling in the toilet. I'm wondering how that came to mind as a possible application.
I think Songshan will be the best person because he figured out this idea.
Okay, so because you know that for our wrinkle system, it's created by the moisture. So I just keep thinking if any things that I can take advantage of these features, like I use moisture to create wrinkle, and how can I use that? So then I think about like probably when we have some cell phone or some computer things, when you immerse in the water, you might have some water indicator in there. So it come up to my mind is that maybe I can take advantage of this features because, you know, moisture create wrinkle and then stay there forever. It just right fit for these features for water indicators.
Ben Valsler, Chemistry World magazine. I'm sure the insurance industry will be very interested in the water indicator. I think that might be the first one that jumps on it. I had a couple of questions. Where you're mechanically changing things, do you know roughly how many cycles that can survive for? Have you done those sorts of stress tests?
Yes, actually, this is one of the major concerns. The first question I asked my coworkers, and we actually did a lot of I would say, very extensive research to make sure, because we would like to use it for real life, and for the real application, this is the key question everybody will ask. So for one series of the first, I would say, the mechanochromic series of the materials, we did 50 cycles of fatigue test. Basically means we stretch, hold on, release, and then stretch again. We did 50 cycles of test. 50,000. 50. Well, that's even better. So we did 50,000 cycles of test, and it took Songshan 3 weeks to do this fatigue test, which is very, time consuming. But after this 50,000 cycles of test, we are now very confident that this is a very durable material.
And I can understand how, when you have a different texture on the surface, that will scatter light in a different way. But how does that work in terms of the color changing properties?
Songshan can probably give you some technical details.
Okay, so actually in this material we have bilayer structures. On the top layers we have a UV shearing layers, which is rigid. So and on the bottom layers we have an elastomer, which contains some fluorescent materials. So when you release the film, the UV shearing layer can perfectly shear the UV radiation, so you can't see anything. Or maybe if you put some like green dye on the top of the UV shearing layer, it will show the green luminescence. But when you stretch it, there was some cracking on there, so then the UV can travel through the cracking and just activate the fluorescent materials on the bottom. If the fluorescent material is orange and you have a very high concentration of orange, the mechanochromism is able to switch between green to orange when you stretch it. So that's basically how we decided.
Okay, excellent. And one final one. Do you have any control over the actual topology of the wrinkles? Or do you just rely on the fact that the material will wrinkle naturally and you don't need to control the structure of the wrinkles themselves?
I think this is a very good question. We actually do have control of the wrinkles. I would say it's all based on the design, because many parameters of the material, the top layer, the bottom layer, the top rigid material, and the bottom soft material, their thickness, their mechanical parameters are all very heavily involved to determine the wrinkle structure. And actually, I'm about to acknowledge the huge help and contribution from another co-worker of ours, our collaborator, Dr. Dianyun Zhang from UConn Mechanical Engineering Department. Her modeling has been a real help, guidance for us to design the materials, for us to have a general idea before we even make it, how the thickness parameter would affect the formation of the wrinkles, the dynamics, and so basically all these parameters involved, and we have not a perfect control, but we have a rather good control of it.
Thank you very much.
So Katie Cottingham, Office of Public Affairs. So I was wondering, what's the difference in the wrinkle material? How do you get it to go reversibly back and forth, wrinkling and not wrinkling, and then wrinkling again, versus the permanent wrinkling or unwrinkling? What's going on in there?
That's a very good question. Again, I think Songshan, who goes through all the detail, he can give you some very good idea.
So for the first one, which is able to reversible, so on the top thin film, we use cross-link PVA films. So it means that it can be stable when you moisture it, so then the wrinkle can be sustained under moisture conditions. And when you dry it, it would just kind of put it back to its original shape, so then it can be released. And for the second one, which we use the PVA film, it's not cross-link. It means that when you apply the moistures, the PVA film would the modulus of the PVA would decrease a lot, and then it cannot support the wrinkle structure anymore. And because there's no cross-link structures, when you after you moisture it, the PVA already have a very strong structural relaxation, which means that it's a brand new material in there, and the swelling ratio when you apply the moisture a second time, it's much smaller than the last time, so then you can't get the wrinkle again. when you apply the moisture. For the third one, which is permanent wrinkles, so we have a rather thick PUA film on the tops, which is thicker than the sample A and sample C, and then it has a clothing gradient. So when you apply the moistures, you need about like 1 minute to get the wrinkles, and on the top surface it will become, because on the top surface it's not very cloth-linking, on the bottom it's very cloth-linking, it has a high degree of cloth-linking. So when you apply the moisture for 1 minute, the top thin film will become kind of gelled and cannot support, it will be a very compliant with the wrinkle structure on the bottom. And then when you release the film, and the top layer is already dried up, and then it has a wrinkle shapes. So the bottom layer want to release, but the top layer has a dry, fixed wrinkle structure in there. So it just basically restrain the structure from releasing. So I know it's a little bit complicated, but it's at this stage we try our best to understand it, and we still cooperate with our cooperator from the mechanical engineering department to kind of simulate and understand it. Yeah.
We have an online question from Christine Suh, Office of Public Affairs. How stable are these materials in real-world conditions, under high humidity or in a range of cold winter to hot summer temperatures?
That's a very good question. Actually, we are going through all these kind of very detailed tests. As the previous question regarding the durability in terms of the stretching, we have done a lot, and we are now very confident. In terms of other stability, like environmental, temperature, humidity, we actually are doing very extensive examination right now. For example, we have one sample has been exposed to regular atmosphere at room temperature in lab for half a year, and we intentionally leave it in the corner of the lab, and after half a year, now it still shows very good reproducible performance. So we are going through the process, for example, try to put it into the humidity chamber to control the temperature, and hopefully can have even more detailed results in the near future. But so far, the data shows that the material is rather stable.
All right. Thank you, everyone. The archived version of this session will be posted at bit.ly/ACS Live Philadelphia. Please join us for our next press conference at 2 p.m. today on how cars could meet future emission standards. Thank you, everyone.